Are you ready to go, Scott? I apologize. Okay, yes, thank you. I'd like to call tonight's November 19th meeting of Parks to order.
I
We
have
do have a
6:19
quorum
on my
for
one.
our meeting this. The first agenda do not. But I will move to number 3 for public appearances, and I apologize, but Patrick, would you mind letting me know if we have anyone in the chamber?
We have 3, well, we have no registration forms from them. You were a little bit stuttery there, so I hope this works
okay.
good.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're freezing a little bit.
Just for
Okay,
your,
I will, hopefully my internet gets better. But that sounds great. We don't have any registered members to speak for public appearances. So then I'll move on to reviewing and approving the agenda if I have a motion.
I'll move to approve the agenda, which we are doing with no minutes to approve, no communication, and no staff reports in this meeting.
I had asked to,
And
Sarah.
then I would like to call a point of order. I was going to discuss this with Mark, but I would like, well, usually in our park commission meeting, and as we know here, we usually have a discussion first, and then we make the motion, then we do a second, and so on, and then we vote. I would suggest that since we've got, the city administrator and probably some alders like Dorothy watching and everything, that we follow the sequence that the council uses. So I would suggest that we do the more formal sequence of make a motion, a second, any registered speakers, apparently there are none so far, staff presentation, discussion, any amendments, and then we vote, which I will say in advance we should have a roll call vote. Does that sound like the sequence the council uses?
That does sound like the sequence the council uses, and I have no objections to that.
Okay, anybody else objection, agree?
I just want to remark that I see Alder Krause would like to speak. So
Yeah,
we recognize her at the appropriate time.
I would just want to set our sequence of actions ahead of time here as part of the agenda.
Yes, so Patrick has made a recommendation just from point of order for how to run this meeting. Are there any objections to that? Please speak now. Okay, that sounds good. We have
Okay,
approved the agenda.
and I moved, so do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Sue. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 just for your benefit, the people that are on Zoom, Joran Friedland, the Park Forestry Maintenance Supervisor, is here, along with Chad, the Recreation Community Center Director, and Austin, the Recreation Community Center Assistant, just for your information.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, so as we know, this is a special forum where we just have some limited time to discuss this resolution. So as Patrick recommended, if I could please have a motion to approve the resolution on the floor.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R205-20, the recreation staffing for 2021, as written and as amended by the Personnel Commission.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So now if we could have discussion. I don't know, Scott, if you want to kick us off just to get us all level set.
And certainly, I know Mr. Marsh is here, so he can certainly interject. And what I wanted to do it in hope that the Park Commission members were able to review the discussion at the Personnel Committee. I think that was a good objective segue into what we're discussing tonight. Just as a general comment, I think this certainly has brought to light the recreational staff and the work that these staff people do for the community, which I'm glad to see that there's, discussion and a lot of additional information, which really kind of provides a snapshot of the work that the Recreation Department does. So I think with that, if Mr. Marsh, if you wanted to add a little, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
You can.
Okay, great. Well, during the budget process, it became clear that one of the areas we were really deficient in revenues was going to be from the rec department, due to this COVID crisis that we're going through, we're not able to have the programs, the normal amount of rentals, the normal amount of people that utilize the shelters, the community rooms, the various spaces around the city. And without that revenue stream, we saw a significant gap of about, I believe it's in the neighborhood of $98,000. And that's projected gap if COVID were to basically take over all of 2021. In the mayor's budget, we proposed one layoff. That would be Austin's position, and that would be effective January 1. And then it was proposed that Chad, our recreation director, would go to Public Works, where he would work in a capacity similar to that he's worked in over the past 6 months or so since this virus hit. There is a new position funded in the Public Works Department that would allow for Chad to be switched over to that department for the time being until this pandemic goes away. So that was one of the options. As you'll see from the resolution, the Personnel Committee made the recommendation that staff look into options to fund both positions throughout 2021. We believe we do have options at this point in time, and Misty Dodge, our finance director, will be discussing those options both at finance and finance and council meetings next Tuesday. So we will have a discussion on these items in regards to this resolution on Tuesday. We do now, just to reiterate, we now believe we have a few options to fund these positions and would not go the original course of layoffs as proposed originally. Scott, is there anything I missed in that?
No, I think that's great news. And again, I think the action tonight by the Park Commission is to, agree with that, and then if the Common Council is agreement on the 24th, in theory, do you think it could be resolved on the 24th, Pat?
Well, it would take, I don't believe it could be on the 24th. We would have to do a budget amendment probably the first meeting in December. But what it would do is it would direct staff where to transfer funding from, basically that $98,000 to the rec department. It would give staff direction so that we could do that budget amendment in December.
Perfect.
That's very helpful, thank you.
And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I have a question. I would like to know if any of those options to resolve this affect the Parks and Recreation and Forestry function in any other way.
They do not.
Okay, thank you. And then just if Scott would clarify, or I see the minutes from the Personnel Committee meeting, and it talks about Scott Endel referring to a council resolution from 2011, and the actual resolution number is not in the minutes, but Scott had stated it's Resolution 81-11.
I believe it's in our packet.
Right. It's an important point for all to consider that the income from, and Scott, you can tell me if I'm explaining this right, or maybe you just explain it. I just think it's something we should all understand.
And like I say, Sue, I think this has really kind of brought to light the not only what the rec department does and the services that it provides, but it also it brings to light that the recreational professional staff, although a portion of their salary is collected through the policy that we have, which would be the indirect expenses, but the direct expenses for all of the rec programs are paid by the user. And really, it's kind of a, they correlate to some degree, but at the end of the day, all the revenue that's brought in goes into the general fund. And if then there's a deficiency, which the council realizes, they authorize the layoffs, and then Pat, as the city administrator, would decide where those layoffs would come from. So if anything else, I think it's just a clarification that the rec fees don't offset the indirect expenses, which is the cost of the professional staff to put the programs on. So it just brings a clarification to that whole relationship, if you would.
Thank you.
I have a question on that same thing. I would like to expand a little more on Sue's question, because I saw the same thing in the personnel minutes. The sentence reads, Endel cited a resolution from 2011 that defines direct and indirect expenses and has never used fees to pay for staff. So as I have understood it along the way right here, the salaries of the staff, any employees, come from a whole different fund. So this is still confusing to me, and to our city administrator, this is a whole new territory for the Park Commission here to get into, that deep into the city finances. But what I was understanding is that, yes, the fees went into a general fund that's used by the city for whatever, I guess. But when no fees are used directly for the salaries of the rec staff, Chad and Austin, this is confusing to me about how there's a gap just because the fees are not going to be collected. The gap in salary.
I could clarify if,
Okay.
if Sarah, if
Yes,
that's okay.
please do. Yeah, please do.
Okay. Not all of the salaries are covered by, let's just call it the general fund, the taxes. About that $98,000 gap that I was referring to, that would be the funding that comes from these revenues of basically the fees that are charged to the users of our recreational services. So that $98,000 doesn't cover the entire salary of both those individuals that are in the chambers, both of our rec staff, but it covers a fair portion of their salaries. 98,000 to reiterate.
Does that clear that up for you, Patrick?
I will accept it. It doesn't mean I quite understand the whole thing, but that's way farther into the budget than I really want to
Yep.
get.
Well, the $98,000 is really the shortfall of the revenue. That's,
Yeah.
Okay. And I know, Dorothy, I know you did want to speak, and I know, Scott, thank you for sharing that personnel committee link, because that was very helpful. That, Dorothy, did you want to extend on that or have something else?
You're on mute, Dorothy.
Sorry, not necessarily on that. What I wanted to point out is that this also came up in the Commission on Aging Well. And after that meeting, someone pulled me aside and said, well, in the Aging Well, we talk over and over and over about all the ways that the senior center is adapting their programs to fit the circumstance that we're in. And they were questioning why it seemed as though the rec department just kind of rolled up the sidewalk and went off to paint park benches or whatever. And they wanted to know whether the rec department should be putting in place some programs that we can either Zoom out or YouTube or whatever to help people be a little bit more active in the community. Even if it's not revenue generating, it would serve our community better if they were working on putting together programming to fit the circumstances. The question that they asked, and I think is probably a really good question for you guys to delve into, is was those potentials discussed and who discussed them? What kind of response was there to it? I've really strongly come to agree that the rec department could have been doing something all these months for the community, between schools and the senior center and all kinds of government programs are adapting to what we're dealing with now. But the rec department has just kind of been, well, we'll just not bother to do anything other than paint park benches or do other make work. I would like to see before the end of your meeting that you get a commitment from them to work on actual rec programming that we can put out into the community. Oh, I didn't mention library. I presume they're also doing community programming. I think it's a total loss to be paying them and they're not doing the work that they could be, probably should be doing. So if you could have that discussion amongst yourselves, I'd really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that, Pat, or do you want me to offer a comment?
Yeah, I lost a little of it, but basically, I believe Dorothy's point was that they should be working, doing rec programming stuff, correct?
Yes.
And okay, that is the intent with the budget amendment that'll come forth, is that both of these individuals would go back to their original positions and they would be funded in the 2021 budget accordingly.
Okay, what had been pointed out to me was the Monona Rec Department activity list. So if people want to find that and see what all kinds of things they're adapting for programming, that might be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. And we are, I know Chad and probably Austin too, but I know Chad for sure has reached out to his peers and looked for various programs that could be maybe could take place during this time.
And we maybe for further clarification, Chad was offering dance classes, via Zoom and that way. So there were some programs that were being offered. The CDC just had some real tough guidelines in order to have the types of activities that you're referring to, Dorothy, and talk with the administration. They felt that those programs were just too hard to put together.
Yeah, we actually, I'm sorry, Sarah, you're running the meeting. I'm sorry.
Yep. I didn't exactly hear you, Pat, but I do, Scott, I agree with you that everyone had to pivot really quickly when COVID hit. They had the dance classes available, that there was an attempt. So I think that if this position continues and they stay within the rec area moving forward within 21, that's Dorothy's comments is something that can be considered. But I think that's just a future comment where I think getting us back to the current state of the resolution on the floor. I don't know, Sue had some good questions. Patrick, I know, had questions. I don't know, does anyone else have any questions as to how the resolution's currently being proposed? I guess, Pat, with your feedback of potential alternative funding, I don't know if there's a firm recommendation. Do you have the alternative funding options that you could present tonight, or do you have a recommendation as to what you'd like parks to consider? Or I guess, Scott, can you give any opinion as to what you would recommend?
What I would recommend to this body is that you move this resolution forward to finance and council with the premise that administrative staff, including the finance director, the city administrator, come up with the proposed funding to eliminate that gap.
Understood. So,
And then we'll
apologize.
speak to the, okay, no problem.
Okay, so if I'm understanding Pat correctly, his recommendation would be that we move this forward, this resolution forward with the recommendation of challenging administration and finance to offer a proposal to make up that financial gap.
Per the resolution, right? We're just,
Further, yes,
yep,
thank you.
Park Commission is just approving the resolution as amended, and
Yeah,
we'll keep going through the process.
the wording to me as from the Personnel Commission sounds like it does cover that, so I don't know if Patrick Marsh is suggesting that we might add anything. It seems like that's the way it's worded now.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I feel it may be missing is that specific, funding gap reference, but I don't know if that could be kind of inferred from additional funds. That I feel like that could make that, but I don't know if our group feels that way.
I would take it that way.
I just have one other follow-up comment more than anything. The Parks and Recreation Commission has a budget just like every other section of the government, and I saw that our recreation staff people did quite a bit. They were never idle, and even though it outwardly may appear like painting tables or cleaning or addressing the condition of the land itself, it's not really make work, it's work we never get to. So I appreciate that it was done. And I am concerned that if the council goes ahead and there's restrictions placed on what these same people can do, such as being told they can only work on creating online recreation programs, that's a good goal, but then we need to know, is anyone signing up for these programs? Because then we haven't gained much really, and there's always more. If we're waiting for COVID restrictions to ease, in that interim, there will always be more things to do in the park facilities themselves.
It may be just to help with that, Sue, the Recreation Department, what they do is they kind of plan a season ahead, if you would. So the first quarter of the year, they'll be planning for the summer activities. So
Right.
when the COVID thing is done, we'll be up and running and ready to go. And similar to what they've been doing since March, they're going back and forth.
Right.
They're still coming into the office and taking care of communications and shelter reservations. The rec department is setting up all the annual shelter reservations for the summer.
Right. They've never, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that that's great. They've never been idle. They're looking forward. So I hope to see not too much emphasis on creating online programming, because there are a lot of other things they would normally be doing just to get ready for us to open up in spring to be outside again.
And Dorothy, Dorothy's point is well taken.
True.
Yes, I would like to comment as well, and I agree with Sue. I was very impressed with the work. I didn't see Austin working in the field, but I did see Chad, and we saw the signs that Chad had painted, and I was very impressed. I still would like to ask Chad how he did the sign that I looked at so well. And yes, these are...
That's a trade secret.
Yeah.
He's got a patent on that.
Well, I'm still going to ask. And as I understood it, these are things that they were working on that either have not been done in years or never done before from all of my time here. So I was very impressed that they switched over and just kept working on things. I think, though, that Dorothy made a fair point. I think that she said that's from the senior center, or where the source came from. Okay. So I think that's a fair point, and I appreciate the suggestion of being innovative and coming up with programs that can be done online, things like that. That is a good suggestion as well. But I was very impressed with what they did from what I saw. And I do have a question, which may be for Patrick Marsh. The kind of alternate suggestion that is in mind right now is that Chad's position would shift to be over to be a public works employee. And as I am seeing this, that sounds like what Chad has been doing now for this 2020 year, is adding on to the public works staff effectively, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So it was a good job. But yes, we kind of need him in the recreation department as well.
I agree.
Sarah,
Yes, David.
I'd just like to comment that I think for everyone, the COVID has created a situation where there's lots of uncertainty. It was also uncertain as to how long it might last. So since we've found ourselves in this situation, I'm happy and encouraged with Patrick Marsh's comment about perhaps there are some other sources. But I think one thing that I would think is important is, one, we might look at other communities such as Monona, Verona, Oregon, as to how they fund their parks department, and the idea that somehow there's a tie between the personnel salary and the revenue doesn't seem to be perhaps it seems to have some certain drawbacks. And I guess I would ask the general question maybe of Patrick Marsh: are there any other employees that have a similar relationship in terms of their employment by the city, in which the salary is dependent on some other stream of revenue?
This is the only department that's the case.
Okay, well, it would strike me that maybe there's a fundamental flaw with the idea of this. And again, perhaps I know municipalities have something like, or the state has a rainy day fund. Again, I think there should be some contingency, because the personnel, that's very important. They're not a replaceable item off the shelf that you can get. They're not like capital equipment. And to be able to just all of a sudden say, well, we're going to lay you off, well, it creates all kinds of problems. And I think the city of Fitchburg has an obligation to their employees. And I think, again, it's unfortunate. I don't know exactly how this happened, but one of the things that it did show us is how this funding arrangement seems to be flawed. So that's my only comment.
And I would second that. Our employees are extremely valuable. We have gone to this point, and we hope to move forward without laying off any individuals. Our staff we're at the same staff level we were on March 15th when this pandemic sort of kicked off. So my objective is to keep everybody working 100% of the time.
Thank you. That was a good conversation. So it sounds like this has been interesting, because it's definitely highlighted a couple of things that could be evaluated further, of how staff are funded, if there's any additional opportunities for online programming. But it does sound like there are questions answered on regarding this resolution. Are there any other additional questions? I don't mean to summarize, but it does sound like people are feeling in favor of this and definitely realizing and appreciating the staff, the work that they do. That I completely echo Sue and Patrick, that the signs and the parks, they look fantastic, that the work did not go unrecognized or unnoticed. Any other questions, or are we comfortable moving this to a vote? I don't mean to rush, but is any other questions or comments about this?
Maybe I could summarize what I am understanding, that our preference here is that our two rec employees be kept in their same roles. They look for what else they can provide through the rec department. If they really can't find anything to do, which I find hard to believe in the Parks Department, they may similarly help out the Parks field staff under the Park Supervisor Joran, help the Public Works Department, because remember, those groups are joined together. And things work out like that, and everybody tries to innovate and shift and, deal with whatever comes up. That sounds like what we're aiming for.
That's
That's
the
how I'm
objective.
understanding it.
Me too.
And I think Scott added one extra thing too, just that he knows for sure that the quarter, like Q1 of 2021 is usually pretty busy with planning. So just kind of keeping that in mind too. Any other questions or comments? Or Scott, do you have anything else you'd like to add? And if Chad or Austin wants to speak, I don't mean to discount them either. So anyone else in the chambers that does want to speak?
Seeing none.
Okay. And I think I'd like to take this to a vote. So, Patrick, did you request a roll call on this?
Yes.
Okay, so if we could do a roll call, Scott, would you mind?
Not at all. Sue,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
Katie,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Sarah.
Aye.
Sarah's the acting chair.
Yep.
And we can make a note that Mark Vivian is not present
absent.
or attending.
So
So-
motion carries.
Thank you very much. The next item then is item number 6 for communication. Scott?
None tonight, Sarah.
Thank you. And then I'm assuming no staff reports or updates or future, or.
Well, we'll have Park Commission potentially on December 3rd and January 7th. It's really in the preview of the city administrator, due to the COVID situation, if there's going to be action items that are going to be needed on those days. So stay tuned for that.
Just to clarify, and I asked Mike Zimmerman about this, I was talking with Mike about something else, and it sounds like the way that the Park Commission meetings have been going, as we are doing this right now, still satisfies the Dane County executive orders. So we should be able to continue as is. But yes, there is that thing of the city administrator, as I heard, will determine if meetings are necessary or not.
That's my understanding. Mr. Marsh?
Sound.
I think he dropped off.
He might
But
have
I
left,
do,
yep.
Scott, you always do a great job communicating. You'll let us know. Is that
Yep,
fair to say?
Yep, I do know that I believe there's a resolution that's coming to the council on the 24th for referral to the Park Commission on the 3rd.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that we probably will be meeting, but I don't make the final call on that.
As long as the agendas come out by noon of the Friday before,
Yeah,
we would know as of then, the decision would have been made, right?
I'll be sure to let everybody know.
Hopefully the decision is made, the agenda comes out, or the agenda noon Friday says meeting canceled.
You're right, I'll let you know.
Okay.
All right, well, I'd like to I would take a motion for an adjournment.
I move that the meeting be adjourned.
Thank you, David. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
I'll call the
All
time at
those-
6:53.
Thank you very much, Patrick. Nice seeing everybody.
We gotta
Be
vote.
safe. Have a good night.
We got to vote. I'll vote
Oh, yeah,
aye.
I'm sorry, yes. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
See, PC's
Thank you for your
thinking that
patience.
he's thinking that he's got the